This video is sponsored by FabFoundry.com. If you're looking to pick up some singles, perhaps you can check out my affiliate link down in the description. Anyways, have fun with the video. Hey, how's it going everyone? We're going to do another kind of tier list. This time it's gonna be a little bit different than usual because I got a couple of requests to cover the state of the meta, but also to talk about how easy decks are to navigate, and for the newer players out there, like which decks they should play and which decks they shouldn't play. So I got a bit of a different spread today in my tier list. As you can see, we have the big brain decks on the top. These are like the ultimate S tier decks that are good decks but require a lot of skill to navigate. We have the good and easy tier, which are decks that are good in the current meta game and are relatively easy to navigate. The neutral decks, neither good or bad. The easy but bad decks, and the big brain but very bad decks. So let's get into this straight away. So most of you probably want to know like which decks are the best to play in the current format. Well, from the initial data that I've gathered, it seems that yet again the Rune Blades are pulling ahead of everyone else by quite a significant margin. So we have Viserai and Briar. I think between these two, Viserai is definitely a big brain deck. It requires quite a bit of skill from the player navigating it to navigate it properly. You need to know when to block, when not to block, when you should go in, and when you can maximize the most potential out of this deck. So this is definitely a big brain S tier deck. Briar, on the other hand, even though you have a lot of triggers that you need to keep in mind, like your lightning and your earth embodiment triggers, I think Briar overall is a bit easier to navigate than Viserai. So even though this is definitely an S tier deck, I do think it's a good and easy to navigate deck. So for anyone that reaches out to me that asks me like, hey Kugane, which deck should I play? I'm a new player, I don't know what to get started with. I would say Briar is definitely a good choice. However, keep in mind Briar is well on its way to Living Legend. So if you do invest in this deck, don't be surprised if it suddenly hits Living Legend and you cannot use your legendaries anymore, which are a big money investment, which may be one of the reasons why not to play the deck. However, if you're fine playing this in the next few months and then moving on to a new deck, then this is definitely going to be the deck to navigate in the current format. It has so many good matchups, that even has a good matchup against things like Lexi, which is rather important. So what's up next? We have Kano. Well, Kano's win rate in the current format is actually quite good, and I kind of misjudged it. There was a bit of a underrepresentation of Kano in the current format. No idea why. Of course, people are more prepared for the Kano matchup, but the actual win rate for the deck, it's rather decent. So I think it's definitely an S tier big brain deck. So we know that Kano requires a lot of navigation skill. You need to really know the game well in order to navigate a Kano deck properly. For some people that's a challenge they like to take up. For other people it's too much work and they don't want to think so much, especially in long 6-round events. But definitely big brain S tier. Next up, Dash. Well, Dash has been also doing quite well. I don't think it's quite S tier. I think it's an A tier deck at the moment. I really undervalued it recently. It's the aggro version especially is doing quite well, so I think it's a good and easy deck to navigate. There isn't much in terms of thinking for this deck. Like, it's even easier to navigate than Briar for the most part. You just boost with your things, you play some items here and there. You have a trigger here and there from, I don't know, like, what's the thing called, the Tackler Pounder to add some additional attack to your attacks. But overall I think there's not that much going on in the Dash deck. Doesn't require a lot of skill, very easy to navigate, and it can get some very significant results like most aggro decks do in the current format. Then next up, Azalea. Well, it's Azalea, what can I say? I do think the deck has potential. Does it have S tier potential? Not really. It's still underperforming. It's definitely big brain. There is a lot of stuff to take care of, and if you navigate it well, you have some decent results with it, but unfortunately I'm gonna put it in big brain but a bad deck. It doesn't have the win results that it should have, so it is all the way down there, unfortunately. All Team. A good All Team player can absolutely destroy the meta. But again, you need to know the game well to navigate All Team properly. You need to know when to block, when not to block. You need to know pretty much all your opponents, like all the other decks. You need to know what they do and which cards are important. Therefore, it's definitely a big brain deck. Like All Team requires quite a bit of skill to navigate properly, and you can really see that, like, if you put a good All Team player up against a bad one, the good one is gonna win like 90% of the time almost, because this deck requires some really in-depth knowledge to navigate properly and to really min-max those hands to the fullest potential. Lexi is relatively easy to navigate. It's a decent control deck. It's also, like, I wouldn't say it's S tier, but it's like somewhere between A and S tier, like almost S tier but not quite there yet. Not a lot of skill to navigate. The deck is relatively easy to navigate. For newer players, it is a bit difficult because you need to work around with your bow mechanic and you need to put things into the arsenal fire, and you need to be a little bit more planning ahead with things like Tree of a Kind, because you cannot play things from the hand and you have your equipment. So there's a lot of things that you do need to take care of. But for a person that plays Lexi, after you've been playing Lexi for like maybe 20 or 30 games and you are used to using the bow for your attacks, then it becomes like a second nature thing almost. It's not something that you continuously need to keep thinking about. At some point you just accept that, okay, 2 resources are going into loading up my bow with my arrows, and you just calculate it into your total cost for the turn and you're pretty much good to go. So I do think Lexi is easy to navigate in general, and it is a very good deck if you want something anti-meta. This is definitely something you should go for, so therefore we will put this over in the good and easy slot. Icelander, I don't know how Icelander's performing. I have had patrons telling me Icelander is the best thing since sliced bread. Personally, I haven't really seen it perform all that well. Like, keep in mind I have a very limited amount of data for Icelander at the moment. I think it's definitely big brain. There's a lot of very important play patterns going on here that you need to navigate properly. But as of now, with the data I currently have, I think the deck is kind of bad. Therefore, I'm gonna put it in big brain but bad, because I haven't seen the results. If you have results, send them to me so I can throw them into the data pool and have a bit more of an overview what Icelander is really doing, because I have 10 games right now and it didn't really perform all that well, so I'm gonna put it over here. Prism, another big brain deck. There's a lot of value patterns going on for Prism. You really need to min-max all your spectral shields and stuff like that. You need to min-max to make sure that you can get the fullest potential out of your hands and your auras. So I think Prism is definitely a deck that requires a lot of skill to navigate properly, and I'm gonna put that over here in big brain. And it is definitely S tier. It has been having some really good results in the current meta format, so we're gonna put it right over here. Very hard deck to navigate, not really something you should get into if you're a new player, in my opinion, because you're going to be having a very bad time and you will just keep on losing over and over, so don't do that. Bolton, Bolton requires some setup, and it has a lot of combo potential, but when it really boils down to it, the combo itself is relatively easy. You need to get 2 Luminous Ascensions on the field, you need to charge in your turn, and then you can do a big turn with your Courage of Blade Hold and stuff like that. So I do think that Bolton is relatively easy to navigate. You charge twice, then you keep blocking until you have your combo assembled, and you're pretty much good to go. So I'm gonna put it in a good and easy to navigate deck. I have been practicing quite a bit with it. I have one of my patrons is currently getting coached in Bolton, and we have been matching him up against a variety of top tier decks, including Briar, against Fire, I believe. Did we do Viserai at some point? I think we also did Viserai, I'm not 100% sure, but Bolton seems to do really well against a lot of things. No, it wasn't Viserai, it was Lexi that we put Bolton against, sorry. Bolton seems to be doing very well against the current meta, and I do think this is a sleeper deck. It might even be S tier if people give it a proper shot. I really think people are heavily underestimating Bolton because from what I've seen so far, it's doing extremely well, even against those really top oppressive decks like Briar. Even if they have the big channel mount heroic turn, Bolton still has a very good shot of making a comeback with this double Lumina turn, or even triple Lumina if he gets really lucky. So I do think that Bolton has a lot of potential. It's a good and easy to navigate deck, definitely new player friendly, and because of all the legendaries that this hero uses, you can very easily switch between this one and Dorinthia, which is also a good and easy to navigate deck in the current format. Dorinthia is doing very well. It has a lot of very easy matchups against stuff like Dromai, which is advantageous for Dorinthia, so I'm gonna put that one right over here. Levia, in the beginning Levia was doing quite well, and I'm still not sure about Levia. Like, it's definitely a big brain deck, I would say, because you need to navigate around your blood debt and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad deck, so I'm gonna put it over in neutral for the time being, simply because I don't know what to think about Levia. It seems, I don't know what to say. Like, the deck seems relatively hard to navigate, but I see both good and bad results in tournaments, so I'm just gonna put it in neutral. I will let the internet warriors decide, or should I say internet brutes decide, like, where this should be placed. Should it go up or down? Let me know down in the comments, like, where Levia should be, because I think it should be here personally, but I'm not sure, so I'm gonna put it over in neutral. Next up, Dromai. Dromai is doing quite decent in the current format. It requires a lot of navigation skill, and therefore it's definitely a big brain deck. Is it S tier? I'm not sure, but I think it's definitely A tier. It's been doing relatively well, and I think it should definitely be up here. If you want to get started in Flesh and Blood, I would suggest not starting with this deck, because again, you need to really know the flow of the game well before you can navigate Dromai properly. But it has a lot of very good play patterns, similar to Prism. Between these two Illusionists, I think Dromai is definitely the better one of... no, sorry, I'm mistaken. Prism is definitely the better one of the two. She has had a much higher win percentage in the Road to Nationals as well, so if you need to choose between these two, definitely go for Prism if you want to play Illusionist. But Dromai should not be ignored. It's a very good deck, and I think it definitely deserves a big brain slot right here. Reiner, on the other hand, I haven't really seen Reiner perform all that well. It's relatively easy to navigate. It does require a bit of setup here and there if you play the OTK version, but most people seem to be playing the Aggro version instead. So I'm gonna put it over an easy but bad. It's relatively easy to navigate, but not really putting a dent in the current format. FAB has been doing really well, almost S tier well. Not quite there yet. It's not as high of a win rate as, let's say, Briar, Viserai and Prism, but it's definitely getting up there, so I'm gonna put this one over in good and easy. It's definitely a deck that a new player can pick up and do relatively well with. Bravo, on the other hand, it's relatively easy to play, but hasn't really making much of a difference in the current format, so I'm gonna put it over in easy but bad. And then finally Katsu. Well, Katsu's main combo line is relatively easy to navigate. You go in with your Kodachis, you set up your big Surging Strike turn, so I don't think Katsu is per se one of the hardest decks to navigate. In the beginning it can be a bit difficult if you don't know what you're doing, because you need to memorize all the combos. But once you memorize all the combos, it's pretty much smooth sailing from there. However, the deck has a very low damage potential at the moment. The damage output of this deck is just not as good as some of the other aggro decks out there. And Katsu's combo turn is not that great. Like, you're looking at like 20, maybe 25 damage if he has a good combo turn, which is not really enough in the current format to really make a dent in the meta. So I'm gonna put this one easy into the easy but bad category. The deck is not necessarily a bad deck. I think it's still a very decently good deck, but I think it should definitely be right here in the current state of the meta game. So that brings us to the end of the video already. I think this overview should make it relatively easy for, if you're an experienced player, pick one of these decks, most likely Viserai. If you're a very good Flesh and Blood player, you will most likely get the most wins with this deck. If you are let's sort these based on the best to pick to the least. Like, I think if we do something like this, you have like the best hero to pick all the way down to the worst hero to pick in each category. Good and easy. I think Fi is definitely behind Briar like this, followed by Lexi, and I think something like this makes sense. Here we can put Katsu all the way at the front, in front of Reiner. And this doesn't really matter, I think. I think in this order, we have a very good order here, with the very best hero in Flesh and Blood right now being Viserai. Of course, Briar is better than Viserai, but, well, you know my weird tier list, right? You just need to keep that in mind. So if you're an experienced player, go for Viserai. If you're a new player, go for Briar. If you want something that's a bit off meta and still decent to play, Levia is definitely a good pick. If you're a hardcore ninja fan, go for Fi, but if you like Katsu's style, I guess it's okay to play. It's relatively easy to navigate as a new player, and if you're an experienced player, stay away from these things, and also stay away from these things if you're a new player for the time being, at least until somebody figures out how Icelander should work properly, because this is one of those decks that right now is not doing anything, and then suddenly somebody figures it out, and then whoop, it's suddenly up there. You never know with these kind of decks. We've seen that with Kano. Like, Kano has been down here for the longest time, and now he's all the way up here doing very well in the constructed format. Like, things can change very easily, because in Flesh and Blood a lot of decks are kind of balanced decently, so sometimes it just takes like the right configuration to make things work. If you like me doing these kind of meta-analysis videos, either tier lists or like these which deck to play meta state videos, feel free to leave a comment down below. You can also join my Patreon over on patreon.com/KuganeGaming, and if you want to support me, you can also buy a playmat on KuganeGaming.com. I have a very nice Lexi and Ira playmat available there. Free shipping in the US, which is kind of nice, and all other countries is like $5 to $10 depending on what country you live. Anyways, thank you for watching everyone, and I will see you all very, very soon with the next video. Take care.